запросити до слова почесного гостя Карлоса Уріате Санчеса, секретаря Пан Європи Іспанії, з 2017 року члена Ради Європейського суспільства Комінхолі Кабергі, і з його думками щодо Іспанії та іспансько-українських відносин. Карлос, зайдіть, будь ласка, вас не чутно. Carlo, please unmute yourself.
Now.
Okay.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Then thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation to take part in this third international conference in Ukraine with this hybrid format, presential and online format. And it is for me a great honor and pleasure because I had the opportunity to take part as a speaker in the first conference and in the second conference. Then I hope that I can continue next time in the fourth conference, but this time in presence to shake hands and to express all my support and solidarity to my friends, colleagues of Pan-Europa Ukraine, and to the whole Ukrainian people, where I have so good friends and I like visiting Kiev and other cities, which is a marvelous European country. Well, I must speak about Spain and Ukraine relations. Well, I have forgotten also to say the best regards from Pan-Europa Spain to Professor Iotzalova, President of Pan-Europa Ukraine, and also to Igor Gavrilov, Secretary-General. And I would like also now to express my congratulations for the organizing of this hybrid conference to the whole team of young Pan-European people, because I know that in Pan-Europa Ukraine there are especially young people very well involved in the Pan-European project in the Ukraine. And also for the support, of course, of the Hanns Seidel Stiftung, which support always the activities of Pan-Europa Ukraine, but not only there, but also in other Pan-European countries. In all European countries where Pan-Europe is involved, also to develop the Pan-European ideas. Well, I must speak about Spain. Well, all of you know Spain is situated in Western Europe. We celebrate this year 35th anniversary of our membership to the European Union. We joined the European Union 35 years ago in 1986, together with Portugal. And since there, we are part of the European Union family, because Europe is more than the European Union, of course. Spain was always part of Europe, as Ukraine is part of Europe as well. And well, we had a complex history as well. We had a civil war in Spain, as you know, before the Second World War, and then we were quite insulated during a period of time. And finally, we became a full member of the European Union. In this time, the European Community, in the 1st of January 1986, together with Portugal, our neighbors. What can I say to you about Spain? I mean, Spain is a country with strong links with Latin America, historical links, cultural links. They speak Spanish as well. And we are situated in the western part of Europe, but also we are a hub among America, North Africa. We are in the Mediterranean, in the North Mediterranean part of the Mediterranean, and we have a very well location. Geopolitically speaking, we are an important country. This is the reason why we have a strong transatlantic link with the United States. And we have good weather. Many tourists, they visit Spain. We are in number of tourists, we are the third or two country in the world in terms of tourist figures, jointly with France and Italy. We have a lot of cities which are World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage, and we have a good weather, good food, and we are a nice country to be visited. Also economically, we are top country in renewables energies, in for example, in sun energy, in renewable energies in general, and we are now the fourth economy in the European Union, strongest one. After the Brexit, now the first one is, of course, Germany. The second one is France. The third one is Italy, and the fourth one now is Spain. We are a country with 47 million people, a little bit more than the population of the Ukraine, a little bit more also than the population of Poland. And we are a medium-sized power in the world. We are members of the 20G economical powers in the world, but we are a medium power in the world with our own agenda, especially focus on Latin America, the transatlantic link, with interest also in North Africa in terms of security, and also with a lot of links with Israel, with the Middle East, but always, of course, with solidarity with other parts of the world, like, for example, Eastern Europe, where we have also an engagement with the Baltic states. For example, we have military troops, well, some soldiers in the Baltic states to give them support in the framework, under the framework of the NATO. And of course, we have expressed always our solidarity to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian integrity, and to the European vector of the Ukraine, to be a country that the Ukraine can choose its own destiny and its own future. And if the Ukraine wants to join the European family of the European Union, they can join the European Union freely, without any external interferences. Then through Spain, we open a market to Latin America of around 450 million people, of Spanish-speaking people. And there are also around 100,000 Ukrainians living in Spain. Officially, they are in the consulate register 90,000 Ukrainians living in Spain, but they are around 100,000. I mean, they are a big minority. We have more Romanians in Spain living here, more Bulgarians, more people from Latin America, and also people from Morocco. But anyhow, Ukrainians, they are well integrated in Spain, and they learn Spanish language very, very fast. And they are they are part of our society, definitely, as Europeans. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about, wait a moment. Yes, here I'm going to talk about the relations between Spain and Ukraine. I think that is more important to focus on our relations than talk just what is Spain and what marvelous we are, because only just what I can to say to you is come to Spain, visit Spain, and feel the country freely. I mean, but important thing is to establish link among people. Then for this reason, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the relations among Spain and Ukraine. First of all, I'm going to speak briefly about the 30 years of independence of Ukraine from the Soviet Union. After that, I will speak about 30 years of bilateral relations between Spain and Ukraine. We will celebrate these 30 years next year in 2022. I will speak a little bit about the history of our bilateral relations, our diplomatic relations, our political relations, and also our economic relations. But of course, there are cultural relations and the relations are in many fields, but I cannot speak in less than 1 hour about so many points. Then, Ukrainian, I will start, Ukrainian governments started to work on bilateral relations with the European Union in the early 1990s, about the time when Ukraine gained its independence. In 1993, the European Commission opened its delegation in Ukraine and started negotiations on the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, the so-called PCA, which entered into force in 1998 and became the framework in which the European Union-Ukraine relations have developed up until present times. Now I'm going to speak briefly about the 30 years of the independence of Ukraine from the Soviet Union. In this regard, the 30 years of the independence of Ukraine from the Soviet Union have their origin after the attempted coup in Moscow on August 24th, in 1991. The Ukrainian parliament approved the Act of Declaration of Independence of Ukraine. Subsequently, on May 31st, 1997 in Kiev, Boris Yeltsin and Leonid Kuchma signed the Russian-Ukrainian Friendship Treaty between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, by which they pledged to respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of the existing borders between the two countries, establishing the framework for relations between the two countries, the two sides, the Russian Federation and Ukraine. There have been many historical events since then. We can mention the Orange Revolution, the Euromaidan protest, the abandonment of the country by President Yanukovych that left the country, and the subsequent electoral victory of Petro Poroshenko, which meant the country's change of side, moving away from the Russian influence towards aligning itself with the bloc of the European Union and NATO, where Washington has significantly strengthened its relations with Kiev. The Crimea Crisis, where it must be remembered that on March 27, 2014, the United Nations General Assembly passed approved the resolution 68/262 called Ukrainians' territorial integrity, which affirmed the United Nations commitment to recognize Crimea as a part of Ukraine, rejecting the referendum on political status, the parliamentary dissolution of the Communist Party, and the beginning of the Zelensky era. Wait a moment. I'm going to continue. Despite the important support provided by the international community, instability persists, the Russian occupation of Crimea continues, and the conflict in Donbass remains open. Secondly, I will speak about the 30 years of bilateral relations between Spain and Ukraine, but I wanted to make these important remarks. How it was these 30 years of independence of Ukraine in this anniversary that we are celebrating this year, and how it was the relations established between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And these agreements, they were not respected, as we know nowadays. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the 30 years of bilateral relations between Spain and Ukraine. Well, as I mentioned, we will celebrate this 30 years anniversary next year. On January 30th, 1992, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Anatoly Tsenko, signed with his Spanish counterpart, Francisco Fernández Ordóñez, a joint statement on the establishment of diplomatic relations between Ukraine and the Kingdom of Spain. Particularly emblematic to remember today are the words of the Spanish minister, Fernández Ordóñez, pronounced during his visit to Kiev in April 1992. Spain considers its country key for the stability of Europe, and that with it, we want to maintain first-rate relations. We see with the almost sympathy the return of Ukraine to Europe, which has the full right to follow its own path. I want to assure you of the cooperation, solidarity, and support of Spain in these difficult and existing tasks of recovery of the Ukrainian identity. Ideas that are currently maintained. I mean, these words were pronounced by our former minister, socialist former minister in this time, Fernández Ordóñez. Governments of Ukraine began working on bilateral relations with the European Union in the early 1990s, when Ukraine gained its independence. In 1993, the Commission opened its delegation in Ukraine. The European Commission opened its delegation in Ukraine. It was year 1993, and began negotiations on the Association and Cooperation Agreement, the so-called ACC, which entered into force in 1998 and became the framework within which the European Union-Ukraine relations have developed until the present. In recent years, Spain has become one of Ukraine's main trading partners. For example, it's world's third largest importer of Ukrainian cereals. Although it would be advisable to maintain and increase contact with chambers of commerce and business organizations, since Spanish investments is still scarce. One avenue of cooperation still to be exploited is that related to the countries of Latin America, where Spain can play a key role through the continuation of the creation of joint ventures between the two countries, between Spain and Ukraine, to try to invest and and working together great joint ventures to invest in Latin America. Likewise, Spanish is the most important foreign language after English. It's the high demand in Ukraine and could precisely help to open those communication channels between Ukraine and Latin America. Ukraine is also an attractive and little known tourist destination among Spaniards. As a curiosity, Odessa was founded by a Spaniard, José de Ribas. Its name, José de Ribas, the founder of Odessa, one Spaniard, gives its name to one of the main avenues dominated by a monument in his honor. Similarly, the Ukrainian presence in the Spanish cultural and academic world should be strengthened. This work has been initiated, for example, by the University of Valencia, where there is a group of students dedicated to disseminating the relations between the two countries, beginning with the dissemination of the figure of Ivan Franco, a writer, poet, and philosopher who even translated to Cervantes. Ivan Franco translated El Quijote, for example, to the Ukrainian language. Spain and Ukraine are two important European countries with very similar population numbers and territory. Bilateral relations are becoming more and more intense in all spheres, and especially in the cultural and economic sphere. There are a significant number of Ukrainians living and working in our country that fuel the growth of these relationships. On the other hand, Ukrainian is advancing in its process of approaching to the European institutional structures, an option that Ukraine has adopted and that Spain firmly welcomes and supports, as can be seen with the creation of the European Union-Ukraine Free Trade Area Agreement on January the 1st, 2016, the beginning of the liberation of the visa regime between Ukraine and the Schengen area, as it was happened 11th June 2017, and the full entry into force of the European Union-Ukraine Association Agreement on September the 1st, 2017. As a result of all previously, as of 2018, the country began to experience a clear economic improvement, now truncated by the COVID crisis. I'm going to talk a little bit now about history in terms of our relations. During the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, the Ukrainian Cossacks participated on the side of the Spanish-Portuguese Catholic Alliance against the Protestant coalition, supported by the Tsardom of Russia and the Ottoman Empire. Already in this time, Spain and Ukraine, we were allies. During the Spanish Civil War, I'm going to give you another example. During the Spanish Civil War, from 1936 to 1939, Ukrainian brigades recruited from the Western communists fought on the Republican side. The Spanish nationalists, led by Franco, supported the former Ukrainian People's Republic, which lost the Soviet-Ukrainian War. After the Soviet Union, the 29 years that have passed since the establishment of diplomatic relations between Ukraine and the Kingdom of Spain, celebrated on January 30, 1992, have convincingly demonstrated that our countries are reliable politically, commercial, and economic partners. We are solid friends. We have solid friendship relations, and we have developed between Ukraine and the Kingdom of Spain based on mutual respect, trust, harmony, and are enshrined in the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation, the so-called Tratado de Amistad y Cooperación, in force among Spain and Ukraine since August 1997. In terms of diplomatic relations, I would like to remark that the years of Petro Poroshenko's presidency since 2014 to 2019 began in the difficult context of the recent illegal annexation of Crimea by the Russian Federation in March 2014 and the conflict in the Donbass, also fueled by the Russian Federation and initiated in April 2014. Domestically, Poroshenko's presidency was characterized by a clear and definitive commitment to work closely with the European Union and NATO, distancing and confrontation with Russia, as well as the intensification of the construction process of the Ukrainian national identity, placing emphasis on the language, the army, and independence of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. In June 2020, Ukraine entered the program of NATO Enhanced Opportunities. Despite the important support provided by the international community, instability, however, persists, unfortunately. The Russian occupation of Crimea continues, and the conflict in the Donbass remains open. The east of the country is currently awaiting local elections with all democratic guarantees, a complex issue that is being the subject of the lengthy negotiations in the city of Minsk. The non-Ukrainian government-controlled parts of these regions remain controlled by the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic, with the support of the Russian Federation. It should be noted that since shortly after the start of the conflict, the OSCE, the OSCE, and its special observation mission, which has several Spanish observers, have been carrying out important work to control and to contain the Donbass conflict. The role of the other organizations, such as the Red Cross and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in addressing the serious humanitarian crisis, should also be highlighted. Spain and Ukraine have been developing their bilateral relationship since Ukrainians' independence in 1991. Spain opened its embassy in Kiev in October 1992, and Ukraine did the same in Madrid in June 1995. Nowadays, there is a fluid political dialogue between the two countries, and in January 2017, the 25th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries was celebrated. Spain fully and clearly supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The firm support offered by the Ukrainian government to Spain in the crisis of Catalonia during 2017 must also be underlined in our bilateral relations. It's worth highlighting the humanitarian aspect of relationship through the programs of Spanish associations to host Ukrainian children in Spanish facilities during the school vacation period. especially children, descendants with problems due to the accident of the nuclear central of Chernobyl. I mean, I remember when I was 15 years old, in my home, my parents invited a child from Ukraine to stay in our home for 1.5 months. I mean, because in this time it was said that our vegetables, our fruit, it was very convenient for young people with these problems created by Chernobyl accident. Also, noteworthy is the presence of an important colony of Ukrainian citizens in Spain, which is fully integrated into our society and contributes to the development of our country. Ukraine is not a priority country in the master plan for the Spanish cooperation. However, there have been cooperation programs in different social spheres, as well as specific centralized cooperation projects. A project to strengthen the State Aviation Administration of Ukraine is currently underway, which is carried out through FIAP Foundation, one Spanish foundation, and in which 2 Spaniards from the Spanish Agency for Aviation Safety are participating. And in November 2019, Spain won the competition to carry out the Delegated Cooperation Project, European Union Support for Electronic Administration and the Digital Economy in Ukraine. In January 2021, the official figure was 94,408 people with legal residence in Spain. I mean, almost 100,000 people. Now I'm going to talk a bit about political relations, our political relations. On November 21st, 2013, the former President Viktor Yanukovych announced his decision to postpone the signing of the association agreement with the European Union. This was the trigger for the popular revolt against the president, known as the Maidan Revolution in Kiev and elsewhere in the country, with clashes especially virulent on November 30. We remember when I think it was 2 years ago, we in the Coudenhove-Kalergi European Society, we give the award to these more than 100 people who died in the Euromaidan square, killed by the I don't remember now how is the technical name in English. The violence of those deaths result in more than 100 dead and hundreds injured people. In February 2014, President Yanukovych signed an agreement with the main opposition leaders under the auspices of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, Germany, and France, which involved returning to the constitutional test of 2004 and the convening of early presidential elections, arriving first in December 2014. After the events of the Maidan Revolution and the fall of the former President Viktor Yanukovych in February 2014, the foreign policy of Ukraine has taken a significant turn in favor of its commitment to Europe, with the ultimate objective of integration into European structures, the European Union, and in NATO. While we live in the conditions of the armed aggression of the Russian against Ukraine and the temporary occupation of part of the Ukrainian territory, certain regions of the Donetsk and Lugansk provinces, the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and the city of Sevastopol, Spain gives its firm support to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Spain fully and clearly supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The firm support offered by the Ukrainian government to Spain in the crisis of Catalonia is a question, during 2017 crisis, it's a question now of solidarity, that we must do the same with our Ukrainian friends. It's worth highlighting the humanitarian aspects of the relationship through the programs of the Spanish Association to host Ukrainian children. I said already this before. And in April 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky, the current president, came to power with the two basic promises: end corruption and end of the war. Both promises penetrated an electorate tired of decades of corruption and 5 years in a state of war. Since he came to power in April 2018, the new president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has modified the forms as regards the relationship with Russia and President Putin, while still stating that the goal is to restore Ukraine to its sovereignty and territorial integrity, as much in the case of the Donbass as in the attention to Crimea. And in this important effort, Ukraine will have always a good friend, a supporter in Spain. I'm going now to speak about our economic relations. Well, regarding the economic relations, I must mention that regarding international organizations of an economic nature, Ukraine has been a member of the World Trade Organization since 2008. The figures for bilateral Ukraine-Spain trade increased from 2008 until the 2013-2014 Ukrainian crisis, which truncated the process of increased trade. The Spanish trade balance Ukraine has been in deficit, decreasing for more than a decade. In the first 10 months of 2019, it was 796 million euros. Spanish exports to Ukraine are far from their potential, unfortunately, due to the economic crisis of recent years in the country, as well as the insecurity of investments and high corruption, which prevents a more intense economic relationship. Furthermore, Spain is a major importer of sunflower oil, corn, and to a lesser extent, wheat from Ukraine. In 2019, imports of these three products reached 1,000 million euros. As regards Spanish exports to Ukraine, they are concentrated. The Spanish exports to Ukraine are concentrated in vehicles, in cars, machinery, mechanical service devices, followed by textile products. The Spanish trade balance with Ukraine registers a traditional deficit. In 2014, the trade deficit stood at 888 million euros, somewhat higher than 2013, which was 687 million euros. This was mainly due to a 32% drop in Spanish exports to Ukraine due to the deep economic crisis that the country was going through. Both quantitatively reduced exports and imports represent a small percentage of the Spanish total foreign trade. In 2014, Ukraine was ranked 61 as a buyer in Spain and 45 as a seller to it. I mean, definitely we must to improve this situation, and we must to change these figures. From an economic point of view, I mean, what I can say, I mean, to sum up is that we are closer from our heart to Ukraine, more politically giving support than in terms of economic figures, unfortunately. And we must change the situation with the help of all of us. From an economic point of view, the first 2 years of Poroshenko, as a result of the Donbass conflict and the confrontation with the Russian Federation, were very difficult. GDP plummeted, inflation soared, and the currency, the Ukrainian currency, devalued considerably. Between 2016 and 2017, the situation began to stabilize as Ukraine rebuilt its economy, replacing Russia with European countries and continuing on the collaboration of the fund, International Monetary Fund, the International Monetary Fund. The support also of the European Union, the support of the United States, Canada, and Japan. We must remember that there is a big minority of Ukrainians living, especially in Canada. In this process of rapprochement with the European Union, the most relevant events of these 2 years were the entry into force of the European Union-Ukrainian Free Trade Area on January 1st, 2016, the beginning of the liberation of the visa regime between Ukraine and the Schengen area, 11th June 2017, and the fully entry into force of the European Union-Ukrainian Association Agreement on September 1st, 2017. As a result of all the mentioned above, and that I mentioned before, as of the 2018, the country began to experience a clear economic improvement, now truncated by the coronavirus. For the Spanish direct investment in Ukraine, the almost is limited. Investments have been made in the sectors of metallurgy, wood processing, construction, and infrastructure services. And in services like telecommunications, business software, real estate, commercial activities, medical services, energy, and textile trade. On the other hand, Ukrainian investment in Spain is even smaller and is concentrated in very few sectors. We can mention pharmaceuticals, IT, textiles, and steel. An essential element in consolidating the growth potential of bilateral economic relations is the improvement of the investment climate in Ukraine and the effective fight against corruption and in favor of legal certainty. The association agreement with the European Union that entered into force in 2017 should contribute to this and is expected to begin to work clear results in the coming years, also in the aspects mentioned above. Over the course of almost 3 decades, there have been many highly level bilateral meetings and visits that have resulted in raising the level of cooperation between the two countries, between Spain and Ukraine. In 2020, the official visit of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine Dimitro Kuleba, to Madrid in September last year, confirmed the common approaches of the two countries to face the challenges in the regional and global agenda. The legal framework of bilateral relations in priority areas of cooperation was significantly expanded through the signing of the agreement to avoid double taxation among two countries. The Memorandum of Understanding in the field of cybersecurity, the Memorandum of Understanding in the field of agriculture and the food industry, and also the Custom Cooperation Agreement. It was signed. The business circles of Ukraine and Spain saw a mutual desire to develop mutually advantageous cooperation. Trade, economic, and investments links are actively expanding. It's enough to look at the statistics of bilateral trade to understand the upward dynamics of trade cooperation between Ukraine and Spain. In recent years, Spain has become one of Ukraine's main trading partners, the largest in Europe and in the world, third largest importer of Ukraine cereals. Spain ranks 6th among the European Union countries and 12th in the world in terms of imports of Ukrainian products. Since 2003, exports of goods from Ukraine to Spain have multiplied by 7 times. The dynamic of Ukrainian agricultural market in combination with a development infrastructure offers significant advantages for the Spanish investor. Co-manufacturing of organic and food products is promising. It's a good field to be developed. The ambitious reform agenda implemented by the government of Ukraine creates new opportunities for cooperation with Spain in the field of financial services, renewable energy, the decarbonization of the economy, and digital technologies as well. Well, the time is running. I'm going to conclude my contribution. Saying again, thank you very much for the invitation to participate again as a speaker in the 3rd international conference organized by Pan-Europa Ukraine. Thanks for the invitation to participate. I hope that next year I can participate in presence in Kiev. I would like just to mention the full support of Pan-Europa Spain to the work of Pan-Europa Ukraine, which is working very well since it was founded almost 3 years ago. And the full support of Pan-Europa Spain to the full integrity of the territorial the full territorial integrity of Ukraine, and that this hybrid war and this illegal occupation of Crimea, and also this hybrid war finished with its neighbor of the eastern part, Russia. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for your patience and thank you for your understanding.
Thank you, Carlo, for your speech and active participation in today's conference. Of course, we would like to see you in the next events of Pan-Europe Ukraine. And we would like... okay. And we would like to say it was a great scope of history of bilateral relations between Ukraine and Spain in cultural, political, and economical ways. So we are welcome for questions. Чи є запитання тут?
My name is Katerina, and I'm a student of Boris Grinchenko University. Thank you for your speech, and I'm very pleased to talk to you and to ask questions because I'm very interested in your country and language. So how do you think, during what period do we see the greatest rise in Spanish-Ukrainian relations? And what contributes to this? I mean, maybe now we have the best time of our relations, or maybe it was 10 years ago. What do you think?
Now we are in a very good moment of relations. Of course, I mean, in the time of the Civil War, of course, there were different approaches to give different supports to the bands, the two bands in Spain, the Republicans and the Franco band. But I mean, this is only just part of the history. And I mean, of course, in the time of Yanukovych, Yanukovych was closer to Russia, and in this time the relations they were not so strong. After we intensify our relations with President Poroshenko a lot, and we are continuing very well bilateral relations with President Zelensky. I mean, I don't see an special moment in the history where our relations they were deteriorated, or I mean, we are far away, one country from another. We are not neighbors, and in this regard, we don't have a special points that they could create problems among our two countries and among our two societies. I mean, in this regard, everything is positive to continue with our good relations that we have nowadays.
Дякуємо, Ларі, за вашу відповідь. І наступно дякуємо, Карло, за вашу відповідь. І наступно у нас є запитання Аня Главак хоче задати в онлайн режимі. Тому, Анно, починай.
Thank you a lot. Thank you, Carlos, for your very interesting and deep perspectives of our bilateral relations. It was so interesting and I would say broad. And I have a question regarding the educational part of our bilateral relations. Are there some new maybe opportunities for Ukrainian students to get some grant or scholarship for studying in Spain, like a full-time student? Does it is it becoming so broader nowadays we are deepening our bilateral relations? And in this regard, Ukrainian students have more possibilities to study supported by Spanish government. Thank you.
I mean, I'm talking on behalf of Pan-Europa Spain. I'm not talking about on behalf of the Spanish government or on behalf of the Spanish Foreign Affairs Ministry of Educational Ministry. But anyhow, you know that in regard, for example, with students of universities, we have not only just, of course, grants coming from our government, but we have the Erasmus Plus program, and all the Ukrainian students, they can participate in the Erasmus Plus program and be Erasmus in different European Union countries, not just in Spain, but in Germany, in Italy. I mean, and they are more than welcome. I mean, we have a lot of Erasmus students coming from Ukraine, but of course, this is for a period of 1 year, normally, or a semester. To study for the whole studies, I don't know if our government has grants for that, but anyhow, good students, they can always ask for grants. I don't know if we have grants focus especially on different countries, so I don't know. But just visit the web pages of our education ministry, and there are grants. And of course, I mean, there are 100,000 Ukrainians living in Spain. And I mean, I have in my class at the university, Ukrainian students that they are living in Spain and that they study in Spain the whole year. Well, I mean, not the whole year, the whole academic studies. I mean, they study international relations in Spain, but they are living in Spain, and normally parents, they are living also in Spain, and this is a big support. That only just coming to Spain to study for years without any support of the parents who are living here with the whole family and so on. But I mean, you can always try to find.
Okay, I understand. About Erasmus Mundus, maybe a lot of students in Ukraine know this kind of opportunity for traveling in whole Europe and get education from European countries. I meant maybe more about some Spanish, scholarships provided not by the whole system by Erasmus, but from the government or by some different foundations or some different organizations such as Pan-Europa, Spain also. Yes, just accept Erasmus Mundus program. But thank you, I understood you just fully. Thank you a lot. Maybe Ukrainian students will be opportune to find new possibilities and
yes, I mean,
great education.
Ukrainian students, they can always ask a trainee in Spanish think tanks, in Spanish associations, Spanish foundations, enterprises for a trainee to come for a period of time. If you have a good CV and you speak English minimum, but if you speak Spanish better, I mean, you will not have any problem to find, and with this, with a trainee, then you can stay longer time in Spain because you have a trainee contract, no, or a contract. I mean, then you can stay longer. I mean, there are always opportunity for young people, well motivated and with good skills and with good education.
Okay, thank you a lot. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlo. And we have one more question from my colleague, Irina. So the floor is yours.
Hello, Carlos. Thank you so much for participating in Ukrainian conference. My question is about Catalonia. The results of local elections that were held in this year in 2021 showed that the society of Spain and Catalonia are still divided by the question of independence. As in Catalonia, the majority of city council are people who are voting for independence of Catalonia. So my question is, do you consider that Catalonia's conflict is frozen, not finished? And the second one, do you think that Catalonia is the threat now still for Spain and for Spanish stability? Thank you.
More or less, the conflict is frozen in terms that the tension is not so higher as 4 years ago or 3 years ago, okay? And it's not now on the agenda. The conflict is not anymore on TV, it's not anymore on the media, it's not... Then we could say that the conflict is frozen, but the conflict is not finished. It depends on the negotiations that the government, I mean the central government, the Spanish government, wants to have with the regional authorities of Catalonia. depending what they want to negotiate, what they want to give them. I mean, but in this moment, the conflict is frozen, and there is not, I mean, the situation is quiet. I mean, it's more or less quiet because we don't have now demonstrations. We don't have now, I mean, also the COVID, I think that has created a different atmosphere because the priorities are now totally other priorities. I mean, the priorities now be health and the priority and to try to recovery economically as a country, because in Spain we have suffered the economical crisis caused also by the COVID-19 crisis. This is the reality. And now priorities also among politicians, they are different. And I think that this climate is now a good moment to cooperate more and to have more dialogue. Also with the regional authorities of Catalonia. But of course, this dialogue must be in terms of a framework, a legal framework. We have a constitution that must be respected. We have a law that must be respected. And outside the constitution, outside the law, nothing is possible. Of course, you can change the constitution. Of course, you can change the law. But to change this, you must change also through the legal methods and ways that we have in all countries with a state of law and rule of law. I mean, our constitution can be changed, our law can be changed with our processes. And in this regard, it's a moment where especially now the situation politically is more frozen, but the sociological heart is still there. I mean, families are divided, people are divided. I mean, it's a time to try to speak each other and to try to forget a little bit the things. Of course, solutions, they can be always be on the table, but always with a clear dialogue, with a clear agenda, and under the respect of the law. I mean, under the law, you can speak of everything. We are a democracy in Spain, and you can say what you want. You can have your own political ideas. You can be a separatist in Spain. You can advocate for the independence of some parts of Spain, but always inside the law. Outside the law, nothing is possible.
Thank you for your answer. And the last question from Igor Jaloba.
Карлос, радий тебе бачити. І дякую за твій виступ. У мене до тебе питання. Як в суспільній політичній думці, можливо, в медійному вимірі було присутня в Іспанії діяльність Кримської платформи? Тобто було, не було, наскільки це цікавить і як, відповідно, дійсно з точки зору політичної еліти Іспанії вони реагують на те, що Україна провела Кримську платформу. Просто до нас вже доєднався Ларіс Гайзер, і так чи інакше ми будемо переходити до питання Криму. У мене питання саме до Карлоса щодо цього.
Well, it's not a topic in our media, unfortunately, and it's an issue that, of course, must be highlighted because, I mean, Crimea is part of, I mean, the initiative of the Crimea platform, led by President Zelensky. I mean, it's a good idea because it's a mechanism to try to coordinate and to establish relations with Russia. And this is always positive. I mean, all the initiatives to try to establish relations with Russia. I mean, Ukraine must live together with Russia. You are neighbors. I mean, all the initiatives in favor to have dialogue with Russia is always positive and are always welcome. However, on the other side, the Russian part must play in a fair play. I mean, this is the same that with the separatists in Catalonia. I mean, two parts, they must always play fair play, not only one part. Then the initiative of President Zelensky is positive, but it depends on the answer coming from Russia as well. And of course, I mean, if you are occupying Crimea and you are still creating interferences in the Donbass region and so on, I mean, it's not a good signal to try to establish dialogue and to normalize relations, because the situation has not been improved. I mean, to establish the dialogue is always positive, but when situations change, or when the situations are improving, but when the situations, they have not changed nothing, then in this regard, I don't want to say that President Zelensky should be more strong in his positions, but because always to try to make proposals of dialogue are positive. But of course, the second part must be there to have dialogue with you. Then you must not be naive in this regard. And well, the platform is there to try to establish dialogue. It's very positive. And I mean, but Russian Federation must also answer in a positive way and should try to change some aptitudes and make some changes in the approach to have a really frank dialogue among the two sides in a fair play. I don't think, I'm not sure if I was clearly in my answer, but we must put more in the agenda of the media and in our society this issue, because it's an initiative to have dialogue, but you have as well the Minsk agreements and also the dialogue where France and Germany and Ukraine and Russia, they are involved in the so-called how do you say the format, the Normandy format. But it's working. The Normandy format is not working. I mean, then in this regard, President Zelensky is trying to organize a format having a leadership, but in a bilateral way with Russia. But be careful, don't be naive, because also to have this bilateral discussion with the Russians, you need also support. If you are alone in this dialogue, you are going to be weaker. If you are together with the European Union, with the United States, with Canada, you are going to be stronger also in this dialogue with Russia. If you are only alone, totally alone in this dialogue, you are going to be weaker. This is my position and my perception.
Дякуємо, Карлосе, за вашу позицію щодо цього питання, а також за активну участь в сьогоднішній конференції. Ми трошки відстали